Okay, I'm going to be giving a little tutorial here on how to keep yourself in position when fishing offshore. And that may sound odd to some of you, but it's more important than you think when you're fishing offshore to not get too far out in left field. And the example I want to give you is one that has nothing to do with fishing, but the first time I took my dog to the dog beach in Huntington. And our dog Grace, we just gotten her. We took her down to the beach. I threw a stick or a ball or something. She chased it down the beach. While she was running down there, she saw a bird. She started chasing that bird. It flew further down the beach. She chased that bird. She saw another bird. She chased that down to the beach. And within about 5 minutes, our dog had pretty much disappeared over the curvature of the earth. And we really had no idea what to do. We thought maybe we'd just wait a while, she'd come back. She eventually did, but this is a classic example of what happens to anglers a lot of times when you're fishing offshore. Is you want to go somewhere and you see something, but then you're like that dog and you keep seeing something off in the distance through the binoculars or whatever, and you want to run to that, run to that, run to that, and then you realize, hey, I'm 10 miles from where I caught anything. What do I do now? So I'm going to use an example of a trip I took with Jimmy Decker and our friends Briggs and Mike over the weekend to give an example of what I'm talking about. So this was last Saturday, the end of July. Heading down to Newport Beach with a plan to run down to about the 209 where there'd been some bluefin caught. We knew there was going to be a lot of boat pressure on the water on Saturday, so we figured we'll run down that way, hopefully get away from everyone and catch the fish. Well, that plan went south when we found fish that were 6 miles out of the harbor, and we stopped on those fish. But being that close to the harbor, every boat that was running to the 14-mile bank where they had been biting stopped on us. And we had 5 boats on us before we got our first cast on a fish. So we just ended up leaving those fish. But since we saw the fish in there, we decided rather than run to the 209, let's bend it down from the angle we're at towards the 267, which, if you can see my mouse, is just below here. And we might be able to run that way, and we're now no longer on the line from the landing. So one of the big things tuna fishing is you guys got guys going out of Newport to the 14 or to Catalina or whatever. They're going to be on the straightest line there. Same with Dana Point. You're going to the Catalina, you're running across the 14, whatever. Now that we're kind of halfway down, if we run at an odd angle, there's a chance that no one's going to be in the zone that we're going to drive through, hopefully. So as hope, we found more tuna before we got to the 267, and actually had the area to ourselves completely for a couple hours. Now, it was early. These fish don't come up right away, and eventually we saw a foamer at probably 10 o'clock, kind of inside in between the 14 and the 267, which is basically no man's land here. There's no definition, there's no contour, there's no anything that these fish are relating to. So these fish in this area are strictly related to the bait fish that are there. So these fish came and fed on the surface. We saw them. We realized that, hey, there's fish in this zone. They're not on a bank. They're not on an edge. There's nowhere to look. You have to look in a 360-degree direction. So over the next couple hours, we just kind of zigzagged around through here. I don't have a picture of my chart, but I've kind of represented what our line looked like a lot, which means that we had a strip of fish that were going up and down the beach in this direction, and it was spread out stuff, and we'd go out a certain amount, or go in a certain amount, not see fish. We'd go out a certain amount, not see fish. It was a pretty tight little column of fish, and we ended up getting a few boats. We called some buddies, and they got in there. I mean, that's several miles of fish, so it's no problem having them around. But that was basically an area where we were seeing a lot of fish. I think we caught one and lost one in the morning. But then what happened there was, what happens a lot of times, we saw some birds. And Jimmy can look really far through the binoculars. So he saw some birds 3 or 4 miles that looked like they were associated with the bottom of the 14 on a chart. So it seemed like something I really wanted to go look at. Because once they get on that edge there, I can define them better, and I can actually go in there and beat those things up instead of just driving around blindly in the water. We got there and didn't see any fish. Birds were gone. So we saw more birds down outside 267. So we ran all the way down there. I mean, this is, a 10 plus minute run going where you're just catching sight of stuff, and you get down there and there's really nothing happening. So anybody that's fished offshore has found himself in this situation. Now, hey, I don't know how far this is, 12 or 13 miles from where we started. Looks good here, not seeing any fish, but we're seeing birds. What do we do? The answer is you run exactly on the straightest line possible back to where we're actually seeing fish. These bluefin tuna move around a lot, but the bait fish they're feeding on right now are like 3 inches long, and I don't think they swim very fast. So even if the tuna seem to be moving in a direction, the bait they're on is swimming as hard as it can to stay stationary in the current. So those fish aren't really going anywhere all that much. So what I did was, since I was low, I ran down to the bottom of my zone. If I was up high, I would have ran to the top of my zone and just say, hey, it's time to get back into where these fish were. Just because we didn't see them the last 20 minutes doesn't mean the bait fish went anywhere. Those fish are still around. It's not like they're on a bank where they're moving on an edge or anything like that. These fish are just in open water here. By the way, these fish were there the next day when I gave a friend the numbers. They were still there. So once I got back there, instead of driving around aimlessly, we made a straight line through the area of the bit while glassing to both sides. And when I say glassing, we're running 2 miles, stopping, glassing both directions. In the meantime, while we're moving, everybody's looking off to the sides of the boat. And we saw occasional scattered fish jump in, birds, boats that were seeing in areas where we caught fish earlier. Didn't see anybody hooked up. There was a couple guys that know what they're doing in there that were looking pretty hard, so we know that, hey, this is still a live area. Once we got out of the area that looked good, we stopped. There's no reason to go any further. I'm sure there's plenty of fish up this way, but we just drove through a lot of fish. What are we going to do here? So what we did was we defined our new area of focus. So we said, hey, that bottom zone, nothing's there. Those fish slid up a bit. And it's not like that's the only area of bait. There's a lot of bait. So those fish moved up into another area of bait, and they moved out and up a little bit. And we went out there, and I think we went 1 for 3 in this zone. We didn't have great results, but we were able to focus our attention again here. So we went from seeing fish to not seeing fish to making a really bad decision, running a long way. And I knew there was fish at the Avalon Bank. I knew there was fish to 14. I knew there was fish to 209. But instead of burning out further, we knew that we left fish behind. We were coming up on the afternoon tide. We drove straight back there. We realized, hey, we didn't see a single fish since we left here to get there. So there's no reason to drive any direction but straight as fast as you can. You can look, but you don't need to glass or anything. You get to your zone and you drive back through your zone. Say, where are those fish that I was seeing an hour ago, 2 hours ago? Oh, they slid up a little bit. Now we can go back to making these wavy green lines up here and actually catching some fish. So if you find yourself in an area where you're getting bit and you suddenly not are seeing fish and you're not anymore, and you end up following birds or a couple of breaking fish or whatever, and you find yourself out of position, just go back to where you were. We had a guy that Jimmy's son, who's not super experienced with offshore fishing, and he kept saying, "Oh, there's a nice patty." I'm like, "Yeah, that's the same patty we've driven by 25 times today because these fish are in a very small zone." So that's it. I mean, it's a simple thing. Give it a shot. See how you do.